I cut ties with my ex and best friend after their affair, but now they're harassing me to join their wedding party. What do I do? 3 years ago, my boyfriend Josh broke up with me after we had been together for about a year and a half. The reason? He had developed feelings for Anna, my best friend at the time. The three of us used to hang out a lot, and apparently during that time, their feelings for each other grew. It wasn't until they admitted that Josh had been cheating on me that I realized just how much they had betrayed me. They let me believe everything was fine when, behind my back, things were anything but. What hurt the most wasn't even the cheating itself, but the lies. If they had just been upfront about their feelings, I might have been able to understand, even support them in some way. But instead, they chose to deceive me, and I felt like a fool. So, I made a clean break. I cut them both off from my life, blocked them on everything, and focused on myself. I poured my energy into finishing school and starting a career. Thankfully, I landed a great job and have been living comfortably ever since. Now, I live in a town not far from where I grew up. I took a job offer that brought me here, and it's nice being close to family without being too close to all the old memories. About a month ago, I heard through the grapevine that Josh and Anna were getting married. It didn't bother me anymore. I've moved on, and I'm even dating someone new. I didn't think much about their wedding until a week ago when I got a message from Anna, of all people. She told me about the wedding as if I hadn't already heard, and asked me to be part of the wedding party. I was stunned. Why would they want me involved, given our history? I politely declined, saying, "Congratulations, but no thank you. I have no lingering feelings for Josh, but there's no way I'm celebrating a wedding between two people who hurt me so deeply." I thought that would be the end of it, but they wouldn't let it go. Josh reached out to me too, using a different phone number, and even some of our mutual friends started trying to convince me to be a part of their day. I stood my ground. There's no reason for me to be there. Even my mom asked if I was planning to go, and when I told her no, she sounded disappointed but didn't push the issue. The whole situation is bizarre. Why would they want their ex-girlfriend and ex-best friend, the girl they cheated on, to be part of their wedding party? It just doesn't make sense. Things escalated a few days ago when Anna's parents called me. They said they missed me and hoped I would come to the wedding. I reiterated that I wasn't going, but Anna's mom started berating me. She told me I needed to let the past go and be happy for Anna. I asked her how she'd feel if I had been the one to cheat on Anna and then invited her to celebrate it. She didn't have an answer for that, so I hung up the phone. Now, the situation is getting out of hand. I'm receiving dozens of calls and texts every day from people urging me to attend the wedding. It feels like harassment at this point. I don't understand why they are so desperate for me to be there. Does anyone have any advice on how to deal with this? And why do you think they're so insistent that I come to their wedding? It doesn't feel normal. Update 1. It's been a while since the last post, and to be honest, things have not improved between my husband and me. After our argument about the way he misrepresented my family and the trip, I thought that things might eventually blow over, but they haven't. The tension has only grown, and it feels like we're on two completely different wavelengths. I've been trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, thinking that maybe he's just overwhelmed or didn't know how much the situation hurt me. But every time we talk about it, he either brushes it off or gets defensive. I'm starting to think that maybe this is about more than just a trip. After our argument, there was a period where my husband was unusually quiet. He didn't seem interested in spending time together like we used to. Whenever I tried to bring up anything related to the trip or my family, he would sigh and say something like, "Are we still talking about this?" It hurt me because I felt like he was dismissing my feelings, but I didn't want to push too hard and cause more friction between us. One evening, I decided to test the waters and bring up the topic again in a more casual way, thinking that maybe if I approached it differently, he would be more open to discussing it. I asked him if he had thought any more about our conversation and how he had portrayed my family to his friends and family. His response? "I told you I didn't mean it like that. I don't see why you're still upset." That response made my stomach turn. How could he not understand why I was upset? A few days later, things escalated in a way I didn't expect. My husband's parents invited us over for dinner. We hadn't seen them since we got back from our trip, and I was hoping that maybe spending some time with them would help ease the tension between us. At dinner, his parents asked about the trip, and I waited for my husband to finally give them a more balanced description of what happened. But instead, he repeated the same complaints he had made before, saying that the city was too chaotic, that there were too many people everywhere, and that the food wasn't anything special. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He didn't even mention the fact that my parents went out of their way to make him feel welcome, or that my mom cooked a variety of dishes, not just steak and potatoes. It was as if none of the positive things that happened on the trip even existed in his mind. I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. I interjected, telling his parents that my mom had actually cooked several African dishes, and that my family had gone above and beyond to make sure we were comfortable during our stay. His mom seemed surprised, almost as if she hadn't expected me to speak up. She asked why my husband hadn't mentioned any of that, and my husband just shrugged, saying that he didn't think it was important. I was fuming. That night when we got home, I confronted him again. I told him that I was tired of him downplaying my family's efforts, and that it felt like he didn't respect my culture or my parents. His response was infuriating. He said that he didn't see why it mattered so much to me, and that I was blowing things out of proportion. I felt like I was talking to a brick wall. No matter how I tried to explain my feelings, he refused to see things from my perspective. Things only got worse from there. After that dinner, my husband's attitude towards me changed even more. He became distant, often spending time away from home with his friends or at his parents' house. I started to feel like we were living separate lives under the same roof. Whenever we were home together, the tension was palpable. We barely spoke to each other unless it was absolutely necessary, and even then, our conversations were short and strained. I reached a breaking point when I overheard my husband on the phone with one of his friends talking about the trip. I wasn't eavesdropping on purpose, but I happened to walk past the room while he was on the phone. I heard him laughing and saying something like, "Yeah, her parents were nice, but the city was just a mess. I don't know if I'll ever go back." It stung because it confirmed what I had been feeling all along, that he didn't appreciate my family or the effort they put in to make him feel welcome. He didn't see the value in the experience, and he didn't care about how much it meant to me. I confronted him about the phone call later that night, and things finally came to a head. We had the biggest argument we've ever had in our relationship. I told him that I felt like he didn't respect me or my family, and that his attitude towards my culture was hurtful. He fired back, saying that I was being too sensitive and that I needed to stop harping on about the trip. At one point, he even said, "I married you, not your culture." That comment was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. It was as if he was completely disregarding an essential part of who I am. After that fight, I couldn't look at him the same way. I started to question everything about our relationship. Had he always felt this way, or was this something new? Had I missed the signs? I began to wonder if I had been overlooking other red flags in our relationship, moments where he had subtly dismissed my culture or made me feel like my background wasn't as important as his own. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that there had been several instances over the years where he had made offhand comments about my family or my upbringing, comments that I had brushed off at the time, but now took on a whole new meaning. I decided to take some time for myself to think about what I wanted moving forward. I stayed with a close friend for a few days, and during that time, I did a lot of soul-searching. I thought about our relationship, our marriage, and whether or not I could continue to be with someone who didn't seem to value or respect a fundamental part of who I am. When I returned home, I told my husband that we needed to have a serious conversation. I laid everything out on the table, telling him how hurt I was by his comments and his attitude towards my family and culture. I told him that I couldn't stay in a marriage where I felt like my culture was constantly being dismissed and belittled. His reaction was disappointing, to say the least. He didn't apologize or try to understand where I was coming from. Instead, he doubled down, saying that he didn't see what the big deal was and that I was making a mountain out of a molehill. That was the moment I realized that he wasn't going to change, and that I needed to make a difficult decision about our future. Update 2. It's been a few more weeks since I last posted, and I feel like my life is at a major crossroads. I thought taking some time away from my husband would bring clarity, but instead, things have only gotten more complicated. Every day, I wrestle with whether I should try to fix my marriage or if it's time to walk away for good. Unfortunately, my husband's behavior during this period hasn't made the decision any easier. After our last conversation, where I laid out all my frustrations about how he had disrespected my culture and dismissed my feelings, I hoped he would take it seriously and reflect on his actions. I gave him the space and time to really think about what I had said. But instead of coming to me with understanding or an apology, he took a different route. He began distancing himself even more. He started staying out late, claiming he needed time with his friends to clear his head. I could sense a wall growing between us, and no matter how much I tried to reach him, it seemed like he was pulling further and further away. I eventually went back home after staying with my friend for a bit, thinking it would give us an opportunity to talk things through face to face. I was willing to try and find common ground, to see if there was any way to salvage our relationship. But when I returned, it didn't feel like home anymore. My husband's attitude was cold, almost indifferent. He barely acknowledged my return, and the tension between us was thick in the air. We went through the motions of living together, but there was no real communication, no effort on his part to address the issues we had. A few days after I came back, I noticed something strange. My husband's phone kept buzzing with notifications, more than usual. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. So, one evening when he left his phone on the counter, I checked it. I'm not proud of it, and I don't believe in invading someone's privacy, but my gut told me that I needed to know what was going on. What I found shattered whatever hope I had left. My husband had been messaging a woman from his workplace, and their conversations were far from innocent. It wasn't just casual banter or friendly chats. They were exchanging flirty messages, talking about how they enjoyed spending time together and how she understood him in ways no one else did. One message even hinted at them meeting up for drinks after work, something he never mentioned to me. I felt my heart drop. This was a betrayal I hadn't anticipated, and in that moment, I realized our problems ran deeper than I initially thought. I confronted him that same night. I asked him directly about the messages and what was going on between him and this other woman. His reaction was infuriating. He didn't deny it, but he also didn't seem remorseful. Instead, he acted like it was no big deal, saying that they were just friends and that I was overreacting. He claimed that nothing had happened between them, that it was all just harmless flirting. But in my eyes, emotional betrayal is still a betrayal. The fact that he was seeking comfort and validation from someone else while ignoring my feelings was devastating. I told him that I couldn't believe he would do this after everything we had been through. His response? He shrugged and said, "You've been distant too, so what's the difference?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was trying to turn it around on me, as if my need for space to process our cultural differences was somehow equivalent to him emotionally cheating with someone else. It felt like a slap in the face. That night, I packed my bags again and left. This time, it wasn't just to clear my head. I needed to get away from the toxicity that our marriage had become. I went back to my friend's place, where I have been staying ever since. I've spent the last few days trying to come to terms with everything. My husband's lack of accountability, his emotional affair, and his utter disregard for my feelings have made me realize that this relationship might be beyond repair. During this time, I've had a lot of support from my family and close friends. I finally opened up to my parents about what had been going on. It was hard to tell them, especially because they had always treated my husband with so much kindness and respect. But I knew I couldn't keep this from them anymore. My mom was heartbroken for me. She told me that no one deserves to be disrespected like that, and that I needed to prioritize my own well-being. My dad, who is usually more reserved, said something that stuck with me. If he doesn't respect your culture, he doesn't respect you. That simple statement hit me hard because it's the truth. My husband's dismissive attitude towards my background, my family, and my heritage isn't just about our cultural differences. It's about him not valuing who I am as a person. And now, with this emotional affair on top of everything else, it's clear to me that he doesn't value our marriage either. I've been in therapy trying to process all of this. My therapist has helped me see that I've been trying to fix things that might be unfixable. I've been holding on to the idea of who I thought my husband was, rather than facing the reality of who he has become. The emotional toll this has taken on me is immense. I've been feeling drained, defeated, and honestly, heartbroken. But at the same time, I'm starting to see that maybe this is an opportunity for me to take control of my life and make decisions that are best for my future. As much as it pains me to admit it, I'm starting to realize that divorce might be the only option. I never imagined myself in this position, but I also never imagined that my marriage would become so toxic. I've given my husband multiple chances to step up, to show that he cares, but he has done the opposite. His lack of empathy, combined with his betrayal, has made it clear that we don't have a future together. I haven't told him yet, but I'm planning to file for divorce soon. It's a decision I don't take lightly, and it's one that scares me to my core. I don't know what my life will look like after this, but I do know that staying in this marriage isn't an option anymore. I deserve to be with someone who respects me, my culture, and my family. I deserve to be with someone who values our relationship enough to put in the effort to make it work, not someone who turns to another woman the moment things get tough. Right now, I'm focusing on rebuilding myself and figuring out what comes next. It's a difficult and painful process, but I'm starting to see a glimmer of hope for the future. I'll continue to keep you all updated as things progress, but for now, I'm taking things one day at a time. Update 3. It's been a few months since my last update, and I can now say that I've made the toughest decision of my life. After a lot of reflection, conversations with loved ones, and therapy, I have officially separated from my husband. This wasn't a decision I made lightly, and it's one that has brought both relief and heartbreak in equal measure. I want to share how things unfolded, as I know many of you have been wondering what happened since I left home. After I went to stay with my friend, I gave my husband one last chance to have a serious conversation about our relationship. I came back home for what I thought would be an honest, open dialogue about how we could move forward. I was ready to discuss everything: his attitude, his cultural insensitivity, and his dismissive behavior towards my feelings. But when I sat him down, he was distant, like he was already checked out of the marriage. I started by expressing how deeply hurt I was by his words, especially the way he misrepresented our trip to his family and friends. I told him that the issue wasn't just about what he said, but what his words revealed about how little he respected my culture and family. I explained, again, how my parents had gone above and beyond to make him feel comfortable, and how his attitude felt like a betrayal of not just me, but of everything I hold dear. He sat there listening, but it was clear that he wasn't really absorbing what I was saying. His response, once again, was to brush it all off. He repeated that he didn't think it was a big deal, and that I was being overly sensitive. He said, "People don't care about that stuff here. You're making it into something it's not." His inability to even try to see things from my perspective was the breaking point for me. I realized in that moment that no amount of talking or explaining would change how he saw things. He wasn't willing to meet me halfway, and I couldn't keep sacrificing my own happiness and self-respect for someone who refused to respect me in return. I told him I wanted a separation. I expected him to fight it, or at least to show some emotion, but his reaction was surprisingly cold. He just nodded and said, "If that's what you want." It was like he had been waiting for this to happen, like he had already mentally checked out long before I brought it up. There was no fight, no discussion, nothing. Just resignation. In a way, that made things easier for me, but it also confirmed that I had made the right decision. After I left, things moved quickly. We agreed that I would stay with my friend until I could find a place of my own. Thankfully, my friend has been a rock through all of this. She gave me space when I needed it, but she was also there for late-night talks when I needed to vent or cry. I'm beyond grateful to have had her support during this time because, honestly, I don't know how I would have coped without her. One of the hardest parts of all this has been telling my parents. I had to explain to them why things fell apart without going into too much detail about my husband's behavior. They were, of course, shocked and saddened by the news, especially since they had grown fond of him during our visit. My mom kept asking if there was anything they could do to help us work things out, but I reassured her that this was something that needed to happen. I think she eventually understood, but it was still hard to see the disappointment on their faces. My dad, on the other hand, was more practical about it. He told me that marriages don't always work out, and that sometimes it's better to walk away before things get worse. He said that as long as I was doing what was best for me, they would support me no matter what. That meant the world to me, knowing that I had their backing during such a difficult time. In the weeks that followed, my husband and I finalized the terms of our separation. We agreed to split our assets evenly, and thankfully there were no children involved, so that simplified things. I moved into my own apartment, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a sense of peace. It was strange at first, living on my own again after being married for so many years, but it didn't take long for me to start rediscovering myself. During this time, I also did a lot of reflecting on our relationship. Looking back, there were so many red flags that I had ignored because I wanted to make things work. There were small moments where he showed a lack of respect for my culture, like when he would make jokes about the food I cooked, or when he would brush off my traditions as weird. At the time, I didn't think much of it because I thought he just didn't understand, but now I see that those were signs of a deeper issue, one that ultimately led to the breakdown of our marriage. I've also come to terms with the fact that not everyone is going to understand or appreciate where I come from, and that's okay. But I can't be with someone who isn't willing to try. My husband's refusal to even attempt to bridge the cultural gap between us was a deal breaker, and it's something I'll be more mindful of in future relationships. As for him, we haven't spoken much since the separation. He moved into a different part of town, and from what I hear through mutual friends, he's doing fine. There's no animosity between us, but there's also no desire on my part to rekindle any sort of friendship. I've moved on, and I think he has too. In the end, this experience has taught me a lot about myself. I've learned that it's okay to stand up for my culture and my values, even when it's uncomfortable. I've learned that I deserve to be with someone who respects all parts of me, not just the parts that are convenient or easy to understand. And most importantly, I've learned that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the most growth. So, here I am now, living on my own and embracing this new chapter of my life. It's scary, yes, but it's also exciting. I've reconnected with friends, I've started focusing on my career, and I'm slowly but surely finding joy in the little things again. There are days when I still feel sad about how things turned out, but I know that leaving was the right choice. I'm healing, and I'm hopeful for the future. Thank you to everyone who has supported me throughout this journey. Your kind words and encouragement have meant more to me than you'll ever know. I'm not sure what the future holds, but for now, I'm taking things one day at a time, and that's enough.